coaching introverts and teaching them this system, which sounds so easy, right? It almost sounds like that couldn't possibly work. Well, it does. I can go out in 90 days and build a $5 million pipeline. People think it's hard, but what's hard is laying somebody off. What's hard is collateralizing your house down at the bank. What's hard is deficit spending when you're trying to start a business.
Mhm.
That's hard. This is easy. This is just being a good person and helping other people succeed.
I'm really excited to talk about KPIs related to business development because that is really the lifeblood of the business, getting cash in,
Yeah.
and how to make that less the process drudgery that I think everybody can make it. People get caught in overthinking it and really turn it into something that is easy to track, is pretty fun to track, and is motivating to track. Give us an overview of the different companies that led you to start this
Yeah.
and the successes you've had.
I was a senior manager at Accenture back in the 90s and had met a guy that I started going to lunch with, and you're dreaming about build a better mousetrap, and of course Bruce Scott. And so it occurred to me as we were talking about how to build a better consulting firm, a pretty bold idea since we were both at Accenture at Anderson Consulting at the time. And it became very clear that I was going to be the sales and marketing guy, and he was going to be the sort of the finance and the technical architect because we were going to build custom software and that sort of thing. And I was self-aware enough to know that I had never been formally trained in sales. So I quit in 1995 to get a job in the enterprise software space around Y2K and all that. And literally,
I didn't realize you guys had met before that.
yeah, yeah, we had
So
met.
that was part of the plan. All right.
Yes, it was part of the plan. We had met in like 1990. Anderson had purchased a company called Bank A, that it was a software company. It's a startup. And in financial services, my background was in banking. And so, we hit it off. And I'm like, okay, well, I got to go learn how to sell. So I quit and starved to death for a year. And then finally figured out that selling was kind of a Gantt chart. If I just worked my work breakdown structure in the same manner on every deal and I didn't chase deals that I couldn't do my process, that I would win. And so fast forward, and then I had a really good friend that worked with me. We would sit around on a Friday afternoon and think about, well, what are the things that we can do like above the sales funnel to always make sure that we had enough deal flow? Because the dilemma that a salesperson has is this oscillation between I got a lot of pipeline, now I don't have any pipeline. Now I got a lot of pipeline, then I don't have any. And it is really hard to start that process over.
Mm.
So we created this little contest between ourselves, and we would, and it had to do with writing a decent piece of content. Now, this is back in, we just got email and Mosaic had just been started, right? So, we were in a pretty progressive company that did self-evident web apps for things like HR, and it's pretty cool. And so we came up with all these categories and a point system that we kept in a spreadsheet, and we called it the Big Dog Contest. If you want to run with the big dogs, you got to get off the porch. And every week, Matt and I would total up our activities, that whether it would go to a networking event, take somebody to dinner, write an interesting piece, and email it to a client. And somebody won and somebody lost every week. And you'd win a ball cap or pay for the golf game on maybe a Friday afternoon. And we got serious about it. And then it became kind of a competition. And we woke up and we were like two of the top guys in the company 2 years later. And so that was the genesis
Was
of it.
that Lawson
Yeah,
Software?
that was at Lawson. And
It's a
then
little company. That's a seminal name for anybody that doesn't know their tech history. Jeffrey Moore was on the board of
Jeffrey Moore
Lawson,
was on the
Crossing the
board.
Chasm guy.
Bill Lawson and Richard Lawson. Bill was kind of the accounting ops guy, and Richard was the visionary. And we had self-evident, we called it SEA, self-evident applications in 1998, where if you had a life event, it looked like Candyland, and you'd say, "Where are you on your life event?" And you'd say, "Oh, I had a baby," and then it would automatically update the payroll system, so all the deductions happened, and new person, new dependent. He was a great guy, and so long
But so
story
that
short, every
system,
year
yeah.
for about 5 more years, my income went up by 50%. And then Bruce kind of calls me, and we'd go to lunch, once a quarter, and be like, "Hey, I sold our little business that we had. We had started some little side business to Tactica Technology Group, and we'd like you to come be a partner and start an Oracle practice." And I remember the conversation was like, I got to take a 50% cut in pay, go be a partner in that firm. And so, that began the journey of we were I wasn't there for maybe 9 months when the company was sold to Hitachi,
Hitachi, yeah.
and I lasted a couple of years there, and then I launched Party Veda in 2003 by myself. Bruce was a co-founder, but he came in October. I started June 1st of 2003. Got a few
So you immediately, I remember going to like dinner or something. You guys were just starting. And this was a Thursday night. And like the next Monday, the first client was right there.
Yeah. Well,
And
I called one of my ERP clients and I said, "Hey, I just quit my job." I took my relationships with my clients very seriously, and there's lots of stories about the manager on this particular account that was managing this implementation of the supply chain, distribution software. She couldn't show up on a Saturday work session because somebody had run over her mailbox. And so I said, "Kristen, you go to Dylan Gage. I'll go fix your mailbox." I went to Home Depot. I bought concrete. I rebuilt her thing, set it in, and then bought everybody lunch and showed up with lunch. And so that kind of endeared me to the folks at Dylan Gage. So I called Terry Hanlon and I said, "Hey, I just quit my job. I need a customer." And he hired me. Like,
so what is interesting about that, right? It sounds like a cute story
yeah,
on some level. It's just that that happened over and over and over and over since I've known you. And I've watched it then go happen to the people you coached. And it's not that everybody built a mailbox,
right.
but everybody created value, built relationships, and those relationships authentically, not like, hey, I'm going to build this relationship so you'll give me something. Just I'm going to go give. I'll use, the go giver mentality. I'm going to dig my well before I'm thirsty, which was a book you first recommended to me. Fantastic book. And I'm going to cultivate this network. And again, not again, the word network gets thrown around. What does
Yeah, it
that
really
mean?
does.
Personal connections, right? Actual, authentic personal connections with people you happen to care about.
Yeah, I tell people today when I'm teaching my Connect for Life workshop, the most valuable asset that you have that's not on your financial statement is your network. Like, what would you really give if somebody wanted to buy your? I mean, if you could, right? If I was going to buy your network off of LinkedIn, and everybody that I approached was just like you. I mean, they could be you, and that was transferable. Of course, it's not, but what would it be worth? And for me, it would be worth tens of millions of dollars. So, you
But
just
when you say that, I just want to make sure we clarify that's not hyperbole. I actually think it's far underestimating because we're talking about that company you started with your buddy exceeded $100 million. I don't know what the exact figures are, but
they
it
100.
exceeded 100 million in sales.
Mhm.
I know one of the former employees who you coached, their company went from 0 to 100 million. So right there, like there's two,
Yeah.
and you've coached I don't know how many other companies
People.
that have had similar
I mean, I think
successes.
we have at least 15 entrepreneurs that left Pari Beta to start their own companies, and all of them were successful. They didn't all have big private equity exits, but I can think of maybe 5, 6 that sold.
They're all having outlier success. Everybody I talk to, everybody has made, I don't know what everybody's revenue is, but I think everybody's north of 10.
Oh,
Even the
oh yeah, these are companies that were 20 to 50 million at a minimum. I'm getting work now because
Mhm.
CEOs of current services companies knew, our friend we were talking about when he was just snot-nosed sales jockey before I sort of turned him into a delivery guy.
Mhm.
Talk to him now, you wouldn't think that he started in sales and learned delivery. He learned how to be a CEO and built a magnificent company. So yeah,
Mhm.
it's worth investing in it, and it is amazing. I teach, I probably do one-on-one coaching every week with, I don't know, 20 to 25 people. Some get it, some don't. And
But you've actually reduced it to,
yeah,
people, this word gets thrown around a lot. Key performance indicators,
yeah,
KPIs. What are the KPIs I should have? And there's like a long list, and we're intimate with it because we've had to research our articles and talk to people. But you've taken this idea that we talked about of nurturing that network and letting that be your business development
yeah.
and created KPIs from that. Can you talk about that a little?
Yes, yeah, sure. And I think what's really fascinating to me is how it's almost more relevant today than it was 20 years ago when I started the company, because now content is a real thing. It's not just a little bit of dipsy doodle on your website. It's like, if you're not producing content, if you're not nurturing your network, if you're not figuring out how to get a warm introduction to a net new client, if you're not doing those three main activities every week, every day, you're not going to build a pipeline. And so inside of connect, create, engage, there are three different discrete activities that we score. So this is
And these are your buckets. These are the buckets into which you create these as your kind of KPIs. You're going to hit a certain number of points, and you've got different activities within those that you use to accrue those points.
yep,
And those points represent the meaningful activities you're doing
yeah.
to achieve those ends.
Yeah, a point system is kind of like the foundation of the house. It's
Mhm, mhm.
it's the meat and potatoes, the blocking and tackling, whatever cliche you want to assign to it. So there's three things. There's messaging, which is reaching out and nurturing your network, messaging somebody inside of LinkedIn, sending a note to somebody in Facebook, or there's meeting, any kind of meeting in any venue, virtual, physical, and then there's events. So anytime where there's like four or five more people gathered, it could be a traditional networking event. It could be you got together with the five guys that you went to college with 10 or 20 years ago and you're having a beer night. Well, that's an event. Because what we're trying to do is hack your brain into doing these activities on a regular basis.
Right.
In the creating phase, it's all about content creation. I read an article in the Gartner group that said 89% of buyers today do all this research before they ever engage anybody with a company. So if you're a knowledge worker and you're not actively creating knowledge out in LinkedIn, or you pick a platform, then what's the point of having the knowledge? And if you're really a giver, then you're giving that knowledge away. Never worry about whether you're going to monetize that knowledge. So we have things like commenting on somebody's post, writing an original piece of content and publishing it in LinkedIn, or speaking. You can, when you are speaking, that's the pinnacle of sort of knowledge worker and content creation, because you're now an expert. So if you're on the speaking circuit at a trade show or something like that. And then the engagement is the last one, and that is all about getting that first net new meeting in either a new division of a multi-billion dollar company or a net new meeting at a client, doing discovery, and then the outcome you're looking for is the proposal. So when you put all of that together, we created this thing called the Net Connector Score, sort of rifted from Net Promoter Score. The Net Connector Score is how many points do you have to do a week on an annualized basis to hit your financial target? So if you've got to do a couple $1 million, then that's going to break down into, what's your average deal size, what's your conversion rate? Because I know that points lead to meetings, meetings lead to proposals. Proposals lead to revenue. Revenue leads to growth.
To the tune of 10 million, 50 million, 100 million in revenue starting from zero. Like that is the thing I really want to underscore here. This is not theoretical because I've watched this play out and just
And
it
Party
was the
made it.
third or fourth time I was in shock. Like just like again.
Yeah. I think the fun thing is that at Party Made It, we didn't have any commissioned salespeople.
Yeah.
They wear that as a badge of honor on their sleeves because, like, hey, you don't have to talk to a salesperson. But, um, it can coaching introverts and teaching them this system, which sounds so easy, right? It almost sounds like that couldn't possibly work. Well, it does. I can go out in 90 days and build a $5 million pipeline. Just
I think it's different. It's well, so yes. And again, I've seen you do that multiple times. And it's it's putting that together with the idea that yes, these activities everybody kind of says you should do, of course you should do, but it's different when you get them, I would say on the clock, but like on a scoreboard,
yeah,
and you've got a target for the week. And I've had success from that
I still do.
is directly attributable to using the ConnectPoint systems. And that's one of our KPIs on our weekly dashboard. How many points am I generating? How many points is the team generating? It changes the game, and
Well,
it's
a
impressive how
really
quickly it can.
interesting anecdote, right? So I have a client, I'm building out an entire sales team, had all the sales team in place, and I was teaching my weekly sales dojo. And they finally got the guy that they wanted to be the sales manager. He came over from a very successful firm, really good guy. I went to lunch with him the week before the week he started, just to make sure that he didn't think I was a threat. Like, hey man, I'm just a tool. Just use me, right? And so he's sitting in this workshop, and we're talking about ConnectPoints, which is our application that keeps score. And sales guys don't want yet another tool, right? And I'm sure this wasn't the most honest answer, but he set his guys up. These are just meeting their new sales manager, right? He says, "So what do you guys think about this program?" And they went around the horn. And now, granted, I was sitting in the room, he was in the room, so it might have been the right answer. But they were like, "Well, you can't manage what you don't measure." Basically, that was the gist of it. Like, why? This helps me make sure that not only am I doing enough of the right activity, but I look back at my week and I go, gee, Jiminy Christmas, I've done connecting and I'm doing creating, but there's nothing in the engagement category. I'm not writing enough proposals. That's kind of like confusing activity with accomplishment. So the model allows the user to manage their own activity and then gamify it with their colleagues. And I think that there's some magic to that. Nobody wants to not be on the board. It's like a club.
Totally. And it's motivating. Like I've always loved looking at my numbers, whether I'm on the bike or I'm in the gym. I love that idea of like, hey, if you get your reps in, or I did the same thing when I was playing music. Like I had timers or certain exercises I did for certain amounts of time against the clock. There's such power in doing it. With this one, I guess it's actually fun.
Well, yeah, it's fun. I mean, and this goes back to Peter Drucker, who I think he's the one that said you cannot manage what you do not measure.
Yeah, I know he's a big fan of it if he didn't
It's
originate
like,
it.
so make it fun. And I get the call all the time. Hey, I did this weekend. Can I count it? I'm like, count everything. Because if you think you're cheating, all you got to do is set a higher goal. So, like, I know every week I probably have 40 points just baked into my week, 50 points just because it's on the calendar. Well,
Hmm.
that doesn't count. I don't count it. So, what I do is I say, well, I got to have a higher goal. I got to hit 80 or 100 points as opposed to 40 or 50. And then I get that tension, that internal tension to go do the right activity. And so, yeah, some people think it's hard, but it's, what's hard is laying somebody off. What's hard is collateralizing your house down at the bank. What's hard is deficit spending when you're trying to start a business.
Mhm.
That's hard. This is easy. This is just being a good person and helping other people succeed. Whether it's finding them a Honda mechanic or a used car guy that is reputable, or I've had people enrich my life all over the world. I don't know. I mean, if you want to live a rich life, you unlock your network and you get help. I don't do anything, investments, real estate, travel, without talking to somebody about, hey, what do you think about blah 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 blah? You know, and that pays dividends. And so if you gamify this whole approach, what you end up with is a measurable pipeline. That's the first set of KPIs that we track, is points, meetings, and proposals. And then that translates into pipeline. And we can talk about, metrics on pipeline if you want to do that.
Yeah, I'd love anything you care to share there because this is, I think, incredibly helpful for technical founders
Hmm.
or anyone who, and when I say technical, I mean people who enjoy making things, doing the work, solving the problem. It's a little counterintuitive how easy this can be if you let it be. And also just that you have to set the goal so you don't get lost just in delivery mode.
Yeah.
And it's so easy to get lost in delivery mode. You stop selling. Now you're dependent on that one customer.
Yeah.
You're dependent on that one client. And unfortunately, I've experienced that. I talk to people who are experiencing that. This having these as your KPIs, your connect points as your KPIs,
Yeah.
saves you from that and allows you to actually grow the business and take your family to Jules Verne on the Eiffel
Yeah.
Tower.
So what is
So I'd
everybody
love to hear
want?
more.
Everybody wants a predictable business model. And
Hmm.
and I come from more of a sales background than a delivery background. I mean, I've sort of morphed myself. I started in delivery, and then nothing happens without a sale. I mean, that's kind of where I start. And yes, you have to be authentic. Yes, you got to do great work. Those things have to be in place. But you can have a lot of really smart people in a company. If you can't get you can't get a new deal. uh, you're going to have less people in the company. You know, I mean, unless you want a deficit spend. I mean, I see a lot of companies make that mistake. So with the Connect Points idea as the foundation, now what you do is you start putting opportunities, and there's a whole funnel we haven't even talked about around content, right? Like what's a marketing qualified lead, and how do you figure out the SEO and the organic and the paid search, and all that stuff is an additional tool that I try to bring people in to help with that, because generating leads is hard. But let's assume that's part of this creation process, and we're getting people to raise their hand and say, "Hey, come tell me more about that article you wrote on cloud computing or Snowflake or the Microsoft Azure Data Lake or whatever it is." Um, it goes into the pipeline, and we have a very discrete set of weightings that we do in the pipeline. So if something's in identification, which basically means it's a client we want, they have a need, we're qualified to do the work. Put it in identification, 10%. So that means if I put $1 million deal in there, I'm only weighting it $100,000. Now, by the time I move to discovery, I'm not only looking for requirements, but I'm trying to figure out, what is the organizational structure? How do they make decisions? What's the formal and informal political structure look like? How do I win? Is there an incumbent? Am I column fodder? Or do I have a chance to win? Is it in my sweet spots? Like all of those things happen in discovery. And now that $1 million deal is worth 25%, so $250,000. But the end of discovery is what I call a pre-proposal, where I'm sending them a very, very deliberate deck that says, here's my understanding of the problem. Here's the approach we're going to take. Here's the value prop of fixing this problem. and here's my fees, and here's an appendix on the company. And I send that because that works for me when I'm not there, right? And now it's in confirmation 75%. And I'm giving you these numbers for a reason. Now, by the time I start finalizing negotiation and start dates and all that kind of stuff, I'm at 90%. So we look at not only the total pipeline, but we look at the weighted average pipeline, because the weighted average pipeline should be more than your next 90 days of forecasted revenue in your.
Ooh, you've mentioned this before to me. It just clicked.
Yeah. Yeah.
That
So
just clicked for me.
in the services space, the problem is none of the pipeline management tools put pipeline in the same vernacular as revenue. What is backlog? Backlog is work that's sold that hasn't yet been delivered. So if I sell a 90-day project and it's $10,000 a month for 90 days, let's call it June, July, and August. I invoice at the end of June $10,000. That's revenue. What's in backlog? $20,000. And that's monthly. But pipeline, in pipeline, it just says $30,000. So we also try to kind of hack these pipeline systems to where I put revenue in by the month and then automatically total the amount. And
Hmm.
that becomes really important, because my backlog in the next month, so we're coming in the end of May, I will be invoicing clients. Let's say I do it on Friday the 31st, and then the backlog for June plus my weighted average pipeline for June should be more than my overhead, right? And in most services companies, and I work exclusively with knowledge workers, so we're selling our brains, and people are paying us for brains. That's just it. And so that covers lawyers, architects, software developers, you name it. That every 90 to 120 days, those businesses are, I always say, they're out of business, because their cost line goes above their revenue line, which is a bad thing, right? Because we do, small projects, small teams, small projects, 90-day projects. Now, so when you get out into the future in month 3 and month 4, your pipeline and your backlog are sort of trailing off, and your costs, of course, are fixed, and they go above the revenue line. And so what you have to always be doing is you have to look at this, and the reason I started this weighted average thing by month out into the future is that I can compare revenue and backlog for a particular period and add it to the weighted average pipeline just for that month, and say, do I have enough pipeline in August to make money in August? And it totally changes the way you think about managing your pipeline, right? Because
Yes, it does.
when people are just looking at bring up the CRM, and they go, what's in negotiation, and let's da 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 da. What I do when I'm managing it is I'm like, what revenue do I need in August and September, and what deals? I mean, maybe I got something sitting here in discovery. Well, maybe I got to do a deal storm, add brains and horsepower to that deal to move it along maybe faster than it might have gone, so that it hits with enough oomph to get me through August and September.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I've seen companies stall around 20 million. I've seen
Mhm.
them stall much lower, but I'm thinking of one case where company had this situation. Now they were using some different mechanics, but not too different.
Mm,
Certainly not as simple. Like I like the simplicity of this. It's not simplistic,
yeah,
but it's a simple concept you can understand that makes the math
yeah. What's
so
difficult,
easy to
there's
think about.
very few. I don't really even know of a pipeline tool, and you can list them all that you don't have to
Oh,
cut,
I can tell you there's not. There's not.
don't exist. So, I built a custom one. I've done that 3 times. We built a custom thing at Party Beta. We actually created a dynamic data link with a spreadsheet, and that got updated from our billing system and our pipeline system, and just put it all right there. I built we built one in .NET that we used. I've done it in Salesforce before. I was helping a client and we built it in Salesforce. They're still using that today, 2 or 3 years later. So yeah, but it's all metrics driven, right? It's, what's my forecast for the year? And by forecast, I mean my budget, not what I think I'm going to sell. Like you start the year and you do 1 million a month. And okay, well, how much pipeline do I need to do a $3 million in a quarter? And how much of my next quarter is in my backlog? You need to know those numbers. If you don't know those numbers, you're just guessing.
Mm,
And so by getting a predictable revenue, you always know, do I need more? Because everybody always says, well, I don't have enough pipe. Well, so how do you know? Because I don't see a bunch of things in negotiation that are about to close. Okay, well, you don't know. Like, it's almost like this activity. Well, what's the right activity? Well, I don't know that either. So when you think about most of these services companies, especially founder-led
mm.
companies, that they get stuck, right? Because they get out of the box on the charisma and the network of the founder. And then they try to hire a salesperson, and that doesn't work. And then they hire another one, and that doesn't work. Then they hire a sales manager, and that just costs them more money before they fire those guys. And they don't know what they're hiring to. Like they don't know all of the like they're
They
doing
don't have their
it.
outcomes. It's
They just don't
very
know
interesting.
that
Yeah.
they're doing it, you know? So and when a business gets above 10 or 15 million, the pipeline's a tricky thing, knowing whether you have enough and how much, it's usually about 20% of your total pipe. So if you got a $10 million pipeline, you probably have a $2 million weighted average if you're good. And depending on your average deal, if your average deal is 50,000, you need like 250 deals. If you've got 125 deals in your pipeline and it's only 5 million and you got a million in weighted average and your cost is more than that on a monthly basis, yeah, you're screwed.
I'm curious too, as you're talking about this, like you've ridden this curve from multiple perspectives, this growth, hitting that first million, hitting the first 10, hitting the first 50. Like very few people do that, let alone do it multiple times, and then go on to, 100 million more. What do you see hold founders back and hold CEOs back such that they hit a ceiling and they don't progress past a certain point?
Well, I think they all hit a ceiling. It's, our friend had a very high ceiling when he hit it. And then he started hiring salespeople and busted through it. But um, I think that entrepreneurs, by definition, are rainmakers. That definition of a rainmaker. And my experience is that those guys that do that, they don't know what they do to make it rain. They can't tell you, oh, I did this, and then I did this, and I did this. And people ask me all the time, well, how did you figure it out? I said, well, I started as a consultant. When I say my life was a work breakdown structure on a project, I understood that. And I figured out cause and effect. I mean, that's what I did as a consultant. I do this, this happens. Oh, well, you do these 25 meetings over here, and all of a sudden you have a lead. Oh, that's interesting. Let's do that again. And so I think what happens is founders they don't know what they're doing that causes the results. And so therefore they don't know how to teach it. And if you can't teach it, you got to have somebody like me to help you. So that's on the business development side. And then on the management of they don't know their metrics. Like if you take the EOS, we've talked a lot about, traction and that sort of thing. They stress that you got to know your numbers. You got to know your dashboard. You got to know your metrics. You got to know them like, what are you supposed to be working on today? And I think that's what Result Maps does, is it gives you the framework to make sure that everybody's pulling on the same rope. What's an analogy that they talk about, that the people that get it
Want it and have the capability to
want it and
do it.
have the capability to it. And then that's
Yeah.
the other thing. We put the wrong people in the wrong seats.
Yep.
We think that, they're a good guy or a good gal and they've been loyal to us. And so, I mean, I have a client that it's really funny. Uh, they've got all kinds of people in the wrong seats. and they're having a challenge from revenue. They lost a client. And so what they did is they exercised this 30-day out in my contract. It's like the exact opposite of what you should be doing. You should be doubling down on teaching these guys and figuring out who are the people that can sell their way out of the problem. Most problems that companies have that are small are problems that you can sell your way out instead of
Mm,
thinking about cutting and where I got to cut the bone and the muscle. Um, when you have enough revenue and you have enough pipeline, um, you can come out of those things. And even in a recession, Scott, I mean, companies don't stop spending money. You just got to beat the other guys in a smaller pie. You got to work harder. So that means you got to be really focused on your sweet spot. In slow recessionary times, you don't go start a new offering or in a new industry. You need to be able to say, yeah, we've done 1,000 projects in financial services or distribution or healthcare or whatever, energy. And you just go deep. And, you know, if people trust you, they'll buy from you. And so the last thing I'll say about that is I think trust, at least the way I see it, is now more with the individual than it is with the brand.
mm,
People used to say, I'm going to buy Anderson or Accenture because of the brand. I know what I'm going to get. Today, they would say, I know what I want. I need that guy who knows how to manage a complex Microsoft Azure data lake, right? And I don't care who you bring along because I trust that you're going to bring the right team to be successful. So it's not only poured kerosene on the solopreneur, uh, but a lot of times the solopreneurs are the ones that have those deep relationships, are the ones the executive trusts the most and say, tell me what you need to get the job done. And you might use different integrators, and just source them. So the network is valuable because you develop trust between the constituents in the network. You're there serving, they know your heart. The triangle of trust is authenticity, empathy, and logic. If you do those three things, that's what develops trust. The metrics that we run just they create collisions in the marketplace where people go, aha, you could help me do this. Yes, I can. Happy to.
so many collisions are happening in my brain right now as I think about this, and we're kind of sitting back talking about it. Usually, when we're talking, it's in the heat of, I don't know how many projects we've been on together and how many
A lot.
efforts. There's this idea of having a channel that you own when you are going to market with a SaaS product or maybe an informational product. What you are advocating creating is your own channel.
Yeah.
It happens to be called a network, but that becomes a form of channel.
Yeah.
And
And I know where I'm good. Like, I'm not good at the Fortune 100. I don't play the schmooze game. I'm a really good 100 million to $2 billion guy, which is perfect
hmm,
for a small to medium sized business. And the reason I like those companies across a narrow number of industries that I'm an expert at is I can talk to the executives. I can get to the people that really make the decision and that care about the quality of the work. Uh, I give every client has a 30-day out, every client, and I give a money back guarantee every month. Hey, before I invoice you for June, are we good? Or do I need to give you your money back for May? I mean, isn't that what the EOS system says? Is what your guarantee? I mean, that's
yeah,
the
yeah,
promise.
exactly. They have your guarantee, you have your
The
proven
promise.
process.
Like if you didn't think I earned your money last month, I'm going to give you your money back. And if you want to end an engagement, that's why I don't need a long MSA, right? What am I going to do? Go up against the attorneys for my client and win? I mean, talk about a waste of time. If you want me gone, I'm out. Just give me a notice just so I can prepare. And it works so beautifully. You need to make it easy for people to fire you. And it's not that you're doing a bad job. Sometimes they've just learned what they can learn from you. I always try to work myself out of a job. But yeah. And services business is really fun, but it is not easy. It's not for the faint of heart. And you got to understand your metrics and what really drives value for your company and for your clients.